The classroom was anything but ordinary. Hovering desks, transparent holo panels, and gravity-adjusted seating made the Academy of Luminera Prime a marvel of interstellar education. Yet, for all the technological marvels, the most extraordinary thing in the room was the girl at the front. Cale Thorne, a first-year cadet from Earth, had already earned a reputation for arrogance. Tall, wiry, and reckless, he believed himself untouchable, a product of surviving the brutal streets of Luna City. But nothing had prepared him for what he would face today. The Deathworld girl, known simply as Vera, sat at the center of the room. She was small, almost deceptively fragile in appearance, yet there was a glint in her eyes that suggested she had survived environments that would shred most beings alive. Her planet, Verdant 9, was infamous for storms that could rip metal apart and predators that learned faster than human minds could calculate. Cadets called her the last survivor, though none dared ask for the details. Cale leaned back in his seat, smirking, glancing at Vera. "So, this is the famous Deathworld girl," he muttered. "Let's see how tough she really is." Vera didn't respond. Her attention was on the hollow projection above the teaching podium, a complex spatial map of the star cluster they were studying. Cale's smirk deepened. He had practiced intimidation. He had thrived on it. Today, he had brought a small, curved knife from his personal quarters, a relic from his training simulations. He twirled it between his fingers, waiting for a reaction. The class was halfway through a lesson on interstellar navigation and combat simulations when Cale snapped. With a flick, he drew the knife, spinning it casually in his hand. "I said move over, Deathworld girl," he hissed. "Or I'll make you." The room froze. Hover panels flickered. Even the teacher, an older alien named Mentor Xylock, tilted his many eyes in disbelief. Vera didn't flinch. She didn't scream. She smiled. It was a faint, almost mocking curve of her lips, but it carried the weight of someone who had faced death countless times and found it predictable. Cale stepped forward, knife raised. "Do you hear me? Move." "Relax," Vera said softly. Her voice was calm, but each word carried a subtle authority. "You think strength comes from weapons, but it comes from understanding." Cale laughed, loud and brash. "Understanding? I understand this." He gestured with the knife. "Is how you survive." "Survival isn't about fear," Vera replied. "It's about control of yourself and your reactions. That's real strength." Her gaze locked onto his eyes. Suddenly, Cale felt something strange, a subtle pressure, not physical, but a shift in awareness. It was as if her calm radiated outward, stretching over his senses like a gravitational pull. The knife in his hand felt heavier. His movements slowed, as though he were moving through thick syrup. Vera rose from her seat. She didn't rush him. She didn't attack. She simply stepped forward, and the room seemed to shrink around her. Her small frame moved with absolute confidence. Cale lunged. It was a reckless, clumsy motion. Vera didn't dodge. Instead, she shifted her weight subtly, guiding him past her with a single, fluid motion that was barely perceptible. The knife grazed the edge of her shoulder, not enough to harm, but enough to jolt him. And then she let him go. Cale stumbled forward, chest heaving, the weight of humiliation pressing down harder than any physical blow could. The entire class was silent, watching the human who thought he could intimidate a Deathworld survivor be undone by grace and precision. Vera spoke again, calm as a placid lake. "You've learned nothing yet. Strength isn't about striking first. It's about knowing when not to strike." Cale's hands trembled. He tried to regain composure, but the knife felt alien in his grip now, a clumsy extension of his failed intent. Mentor X Wylock cleared his throat, drawing the room's attention. Cadet Kale, step aside. And Cadet Vera, please continue the lesson. Vera returned to her seat, still smiling faintly, as if the encounter had been a simple exercise. She picked up a hollow dagger from the instructor's table and traced a path through the spatial map, demonstrating angles, vectors, and force distribution with perfect clarity. The class leaned in, captivated. Kale, however, was frozen, realizing that the girl he had thought fragile had just rewritten every expectation he held about power, precision, and control. Days passed, but the lesson stayed with him. Kale attempted to provoke her again, in simulations and exercises, but each time, Vera responded not with aggression, but with calm and measured counteractions that left him off balance. Slowly, he began to understand. It wasn't the knife. It wasn't the threat. It was his own lack of control that had put him at a disadvantage. Vera had survived Verdant 9 by mastering herself before mastering her environment. The storms and predators were secondary. The real challenge was awareness and composure under pressure. Kale started observing her closely. How she breathed. How she shifted weight. How her eyes missed nothing yet seemed to see everything. It was a choreography of instinct and discipline. Weeks later, during the final training evaluation, Kale faced the simulation scenario that had humiliated him before, a hostile boarding raid with unpredictable environmental hazards. He entered the chamber with his weapon at the ready. Vera was on the other side, her stance relaxed. She didn't threaten. She didn't even glance at him. The simulation began. Chaos erupted, alarms blared, automated defense drones swarmed, gravity shifted unpredictably. Kale reacted with training and speed, but it wasn't enough. Vera stepped forward, moving with deliberate ease, positioning herself between him and incoming threats, not to attack him, but to guide him. Each motion she made subtly directed his path, deflecting hazards without touching him, allowing him to survive what would have been certain failure. By the end of the scenario, Kale realized something profound. He hadn't won by strength or intimidation. He had won because he had learned to follow, to trust in guidance, and to understand the rhythm of threat and response. When the simulation ended, Vera simply smiled. Not mocking, but approving. Good, she said softly. You're finally learning. Kale never forgot that lesson. By the time he graduated, he had become one of the Academy's top cadets, not because he had sharpened his weapons or increased his reflexes, but because he had learned the most important principle of Deathworld survival. Strength begins within. Years later, when asked to train new cadets, Kale told them the story of the girl who had disarmed him without ever touching him. How she had turned aggression into understanding, fear into respect, and chaos into a lesson. And he always ended with the same words. In every conflict, remember, it's not the knife that teaches the lesson. It's the hand that wields wisdom and the calm that turns challenge into mastery. The Deathworld girl, Vera, had smiled, and in that smile lay the power to end a lesson, reshape a mind, and inspire generations.